Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sincerely Self podcast. Today, I'm so excited because I know we're going to have such an insightful conversation about something that I haven't actually really talked about much on the podcast. So, our guest today, she is a board certified sexologist, a best-selling author, and also a national speaker, among so many other titles. We are joined by the amazing Diane Mueller today. Diane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lexi. It's so great to be here. And I'm very excited with this about this taboo topic. I think we're going to break some myths and really help people get more comfortable with their relationships and their sexual wellness.
Agreed. I'm so excited for the things that you're going to unlock for the audience today. I just know it's going to be amazing. So, jumping right in, tell us a little bit about you and kind of what led you to your career.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a board certified sexologist, like you mentioned, and I have a double doctorate degree, which is really interesting from a standpoint of what led me in here, because the beginning of my story of being interested in sex actually came long before I had any titles. And I was experiencing a lot of chronic vulvar pain. And for those people who are not familiar with the term vulva, that's that location of the woman's anatomy that's just outside the vagina. So it's really including your outer lips, your inner lips, your clitoris, all of those different areas, right, are considered a part of the vulva. So I was experiencing this vulvar pain, didn't know anything about medicine at this time. And I went to the doctor, and the doctors were like, well, everything's normal. Everything's checking out. There's no problems. And I'm like, well, great, except for the fact that this pain is keeping me up at night and it's like pretty severe. So, what the heck? So, I was telling my roommate, I was about 20 years old at this time. I was telling my roommate about this, and she handed me a book that she thought could help me. And I will take a pause and a detour in the story to say that I grew up really strict Catholic, so we had a lot of rules around what sex was and when sex could be experienced and when it was okay and when it was wrong and shameful and all these things. So when my roommate at the time handed me the book called Sex for One by Betty Dodson, I about fell off my chair, right? It's like this was so because as the title describes, it's all about self-pleasure. But she said she thought it could help me. So one night, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep with this pain again. And I was like, screw it. I need something. Nobody else has anything for me. So I opened this book, and it was super interesting, Lexi, because in the book, Betty talks about a lot of things, but one of them she describes is how through self pleasure, she was finding that people were having pain go away. So I felt like it was like one of those books you read, we get to read as humans, where it's like, wow, this book was talking directly to me.
Mhm.
So I tried it. I tried self pleasure for the first time. And lo and behold, the pain went away. And I was like, well, this is freaking interesting, right? And so tried it again. Like the pain was there the next night, tried it again. Pain went away. I could sleep. And after several nights of doing this, the pain was totally gone. So that was like my first interest. But I spent about 2 decades really in self study with sex, with just like this was, kind of just my interest behind closed doors before I figured that I was like, that I just really had to start speaking out about this. So that's where, fast forward now, that's where we are now. But it was really like that initial impetus to say, what sort of things have we been told that aren't really full truths, right? And it really opened the door of asking questions for me and really leading me to believe that pleasure isn't just about desire. Like it is, but it's not just. And pleasure's not just about desire, it's really something we require. And that's one of my main teachings is like what pleasure actually does, not only to support our relationship, but actually to alleviate pain, to build bone, to reduce stress, to help sleep, on and on and on and on. There's this science behind pleasure that we're just not talking about a lot in holistic medicine. And my work is really helping people understand that when we're talking about becoming holistic, whole people, when we're talking about really having the ultimate of a healthy body, a healthy mind, a healthy spirit, a healthy relationship, that pleasure, there's science behind pleasure that's really showing that this is an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Like you were saying, I feel like in holistic medicine and especially Western medicine, there is not much conversation behind pleasure, especially with women, especially the benefits of it. It's seen as so taboo, like you were saying. And I think it's just so symbolic in the fact that you had like a friend that was trying to help you with this issue, and you had gone to the doctor and had no help in it. And what ended up helping you was the pleasure that is so tabooed. And so, something that you talk a lot about in your teachings is libido and just the importance of it. So, give us a little overview of libido and why it's so important.
Great question. And the first thing I think is to define this. So, libido, when we're talking about libido, by definition, we're talking about sex drive, right? That's what we're saying. And, one of the real interesting things, Lexi, is people will often ask me, like, well, how do I know if my libido's low? How do I know if I have low sex drive? And that's really interesting to me because there's not a medical definition really for it that fits. And so, medically, if somebody has a low sex drive, we would actually, the medical term for that is hypoactive sexual desire disorder. That silly mouthful. And so, in order to get diagnosed with that silly mouthful, you have to tell your doctor that you have a low sex drive for 6 months. So, essentially, what we're saying is if you tell your doctor you have a low sex drive for 6 months, your doctor will say, great, your diagnosis is low sex drive. It's bogus, right? It's like, so it's not
Yeah.
telling anybody, like, well, what is actually healthy? So I look at surveys. I look at this type of research where it's like, where are couples actually that are saying, hey, we are super happy with our relationship, we're super happy with our intimate life, that we are thriving as couples. Where are they on average having sex? And what is the frequency? And what we see, it's about once a week. And what these surveys have shown is that when they look at couples that are having sex more frequent than that, there's actually other health benefits that can come with that. People start sleeping better, people have more stress resilience. Sex can actually lower our cortisol, our stress hormone. So we see there's additional benefits from more frequent sex, but from the standpoint of, hey, at what point do we see there's a direct relationship with frequency of sex and the relationship starting to crumble, just not thriving the way most people are looking for? And that's that once a week mark. So that's what I tell people, like, hey, if you're not having that motivation to have sex on about once a week, that's when we can actually say the desire is low, that there's low libido. And that's a big red flag to say, hey, we should start working on this and put effort into this again. Now, then we get into a conversation around, like, some people are saying, okay, well, if that's the thing, then I'll just have obligatory sex, and because I know it's good for me. And, and there can be, sometimes benefits from that, but a lot of times that goes haywire because people are showing up and they're not getting their needs met. So another way that we can answer that question on libido is to talk about the difference between desire and arousal.
Yeah, for sure. I think opening up that conversation is so important, especially because so many women, I'm sure, are like, what? I didn't even know the importance of this. I didn't even know the benefits of this. I didn't know this was not normal. And so I think it's such a big thing to be open about.
Yeah, I appreciate, and I'll comment on that. Before I do, I appreciate you brought up this, like, I didn't know I was not normal, because one of the things I like to talk about is, like, in life, oftentimes we confuse normal and common. So if we
Mhm.
interview our friends and, we're talking to our other married or long-term partnered friends, and we're hearing like, oh, you only have sex like once a quarter, you only have sex a few times a year. We start talking to other people and we're like, okay, so I'm good, I'm normal, that's what happens in long term. And we start to say, hey, this is common, which is what that is, and say, oh, it's normal. They're not the same thing. So when we interview our friends, what we're coming up with, like, is this a common problem? Yes, it's a common problem. Is this normal? No. I mean, there's so much that can be said about a healthy sex drive being linked to resiliency. And, these things we get in our body are symptoms, right? So if somebody wakes up and they have low grade nausea every day, right? And let's say they're functioning, they're going through their lives. It's not like it's affecting their day to day from a standpoint of their life is falling apart. But is that actually healthy, right? Is that actually normal? No, that it's a sign that something in the body's out of balance. And that's what low libido is. It's a sign that those vitality reserves are out of balance. But what's really interesting is, so much of the time when it comes to desire and when it comes to libido, women in particular, and it can happen to men too, but women in particular are coming to the table being like, well, when am I going to want it again? That's one of the reasons the title to my book is called Want to Want It, is because, women come up and they say, well, when am I going to want it again? But here's the
Yeah.
thing. So the way desire works in the female brain and male brain is actually very different. So with men, desire is actually happening before arousal. For women, arousal happens before desire. And this is where we can go very, very wrong in thinking we have a problem. So, what I mean by that is desires of the mind, arousals of the body. So, for men, desire and arousal looks like this. He sees his lovely partner walking across the room, sees the way her butt jiggles, her breast bounce. He's like, wow, that looks yummy. I would love to make love, right? And so
Hmm.
that's the mind, that's the desire. And then what happens is as soon as he thinks that, because he has a fast acting blood flow system, blood rushes to the penis, the erectile tissue. And if everything's working right, he gets erect. That is arousal. That is of the body. That's his body responding. Okay. So desire first, arousal second. For
Hmm.
women, what is so interesting is the opposite happens. Arousal is first. So oftentimes and if she's with a male partner, they're waiting. They're like hanging back and they're like waiting. When is she going to want it? When is she going to want it? When is she going to want it? And she's like, well, I've had 17 things to do today. I still have a list. The laundry needs to be done. Dinner needs to be cooked. I still have kids stuff to. I've been running around playing soccer mom all night. And she's like, where do I fit this desire out at like in all that? She doesn't. It
Hmm.
does. It's not how the women's brain works in long-term relationships most commonly. There's always exceptions, of course. But what happens for her is he gives her, help in the kitchen. He says, go lay in bed. I want you to go take a bath. I want you to do something. I'm going to come up in a little while and I'm going to give you a massage. And it's not focused on sex. And it's all about her dropping the things of the day, feeling into the body. And the more she's able to drop the things of the day and feel the sensations of the body, the more she has the potential to get aroused and be like, wow, it actually feels good to be in my body. It feels good to experience touch. It feels good to experience pleasure. And that's where, for many, many women, then secondly, that desire can kick on. And, a really extreme example of this, which is also pretty common, is she decides at this point, okay, I am going to go ahead and have sex. She's not really feeling it yet, but she just makes that choice. And all of a sudden, a few minutes into it, as her body gets more and more aroused and she starts to feel more sensations, then she has the mind come on and it's like, oh, this is actually kind of great. I'm kind of into it. And maybe later on in making love, she even says something like, that was awesome. Why don't we do that more often? And that's because the desire, that part of the brain that says, I want this, much of the time for the overwhelmed woman is not kicking in until she's actually aroused in her body. So, for many women in hetero relationships, it's really important to understand this that sex is not initiated when both of them think about it in their mind. Because a lot of times, if that's the case, it's never going to happen because her sexual arousal system is going to be very different than his. And of course, it's more complicated than that. The women's arousal system is very intricate. So it's not that it has to go that way all the time by any means. There's a lot of brakes and accelerators for the woman, but that is like the most common way it goes for the overwhelmed woman. And so the more we can say, hey, we're going to actually prioritize this, we're going to work together in partnership to help get her in her body, drop the stresses of the day, and just feel into the sensations of pleasure, the more they can get actually back on the same page with their arousal.
Yeah, I love that you say that. I'm literally going to be like, everyone go to this part of the episode right now because I think so many women feel so much guilt around that. They may compare their arousal to their partners if they're in a heterosexual relationship and think, why am I not getting aroused the same way he is, or why is it not so fast for me? And it's like such a mind thing. So I love that you backed that up, that it's such a mind thing. And if you don't feel almost like safe in the situation, then yeah, it might take you a second, and that's okay because men and women are so different in that way. And I do want to ask, how does the women's cycle play into arousal and libido, and how much does it fluctuate during a woman's cycle?
It definitely fluctuates during a woman's cycle. I mean, there's many different root causes of, say, low desire for women. There's our physical side of things, our personal side of things, like how we feel about our body. Do we experience any shame? And then there's the interpersonal of how we actually interact with our partner. Are we able to ask for our needs? Are we able to bring up things like, hey, honey, I need more time, right? So, from the physical side of things, hormones are a really big component of things. And there's actually many different root causes from the physical side of things: circulation, stress, neurological inflammation, pelvic problems, on and on. And so, if people want to go take a great quiz, I have a great free quiz for your audience that will give them insight as to the top physical root causes and give them insight as to what tests to ask their doctor for, because a lot of times doctors are not getting the right tests ordered to actually support people. So people can find that at libidoquiz.com. And so that's where you can say, okay, is it a hormonal problem? Is it something else? And it's going to guide you from there where to go. So hormonal problems as one of our physical root causes can happen for many reasons. And certainly there's there's the cyclical reasons like you're bringing up. And then of course there is like midlife changes around perimenopause and menopause.
Mhm.
So progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone all have some level of component of helping us with our sex drive. Estrogen and testosterone out of those three are going to be much stronger from a standpoint of our sex drive than the progesterone. And so at times when we're ovulating, right, when we could actually get pregnant as women, that mid cycle, that's when our estrogen and our testosterone are the strongest. So not only from a procreation standpoint does that make sense, but it also makes sense why a lot of women will get hornier around their ovulatory time if they're still menstruating. So we absolutely see that. We see that the time of the month at the end where we get a sharp drop of everything, like just before menstruation when hormones are at their lowest. Oftentimes that's when sex drive can be at its lowest as well, right? Our hormones are like kind of close to flatline. They never really flatline, but close to flatline. So we can certainly see that there is that natural oscillation. Now, that being said, when we are still doing all these other things that I teach around how to have a healthy libido, we might find that okay, at this point a month, it's a little easier for us to access. But using some of these other techniques, understanding desire, we can still work in these other times a month to still get our arousal cycle going. It might not be as like in the forefront, because around the ovulatory time, that's an example of when we might have more like the desire for similar to a man, right? Because of that hormonal increase.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you describe that so thoroughly because men are on a 24-hour cycle. And so I think in relationships, a lot of times women don't understand how much their mind and their arousal and their libido may fluctuate as well as other things in their body. And so I love that you described that so beautifully. Tell us a little bit about your book.
It's called Want to Want It. You can find it at wanttowantit.com. And it really is helping. It's really built for couples. That's who my work is for. Is really for long-term couples that love each other, that are still, deeply care about each other, but have just lost that flame, lost that spark, and are like, hey, what happened to our passion? We've really been fed a myth that passion has to die with the longevity of a relationship. Left to its own devices, we get into our habits. We're creatures of habit. So, left to our own devices, yeah, it probably will. But that's just because we don't have the training. It's like left to our own devices. If we're eating fast food every day and we don't understand nutrition, we're probably not going to be as healthy. We're probably not going to be super healthy. But then if we come in and circumvent and say, oh, I'm going to learn about nutrition, I'm going to learn how to take care of my body, then we take different steps. So my work around in this book, around all of my work, is really helping people understand those steps to take, just like with nutrition, to actually keep the passion and the sex in the relationship really strong so that the relationship can stay strong. Because we also see that but one of the top 5 reasons across surveys why couples split up or get divorced is a lack of intimacy. It's a huge reason for cheating. It's a huge reason for all of that. And we see that of all the couples that really report having super, super happy lives as far as their sex life, 82 to 90% of them talk about sex. But how do we do that? Because so often when people talk about it, they get their feelings hurt and people get shut down and avoidant, and it can be so intense. So in
Yeah.
my book, I go through things like the root causes of low libido, like what we talked about here, with a lot more detail. I talk about communication. I talk about how to have better sex, better orgasms. Lack of orgasm or difficulty orgasm or just not having very good orgasms is so common for females. And it's
Hmm.
because females oftentimes are having sex like men do, this 2 to 5 minute thing and it ends. And our bodies don't work like that. And women need to understand that and men need to understand it. And it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong when we don't understand that, but it's just like anything else. It's like we don't know what we don't know. So I'm really working to fill in the gap that's not there in the sex education site. But my work really is doing it in still a way where it's like there's not nudity in my work. There's no porn in my work. I talk about techniques. I give images that are almost like cartoon like images to help people in my work so they can see things, but still keeping it like away from anything that could be construed as porn in any way. So it's a very classy way of approaching the topic.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I think sometimes people stigmatize anything that has to do with sex, anything in the sex education world, they take as like so taboo and like porn and things like that. And so I love that you saying it's in a classy way because it is so important to know these things. And like you were saying, it's so beneficial to your relationship. So men, women, anyone listening to this in a relationship, I really encourage you to go and read this book and just gain insight. Even if you feel like you are very comfortable in your sex life, I don't think there's anything wrong in just educating yourself further and maybe getting ideas on how to open up the conversation. Because, like Dan was saying, a lot of times people get their feelings hurt in these conversations or they don't even know how to bring it up to their partner. And so you could learn tools from these books that will help you be able to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And thank you for naming that because it is a really important thing, right? It's like, even if people are like, oh, I've got this, left to our own devices, we do tend to get in these sexual ruts and things can get a little boring and that sort of thing. So, the idea of like is to, if it's kind of out of balance, to bring it in balance. But if it's like not really out of balance, and actually take steps to say, how can we actually take care of our sexual relationship and our relationship as a whole so we make sure it continues to stay strong, which is a really, it's a preventative way of approaching the relationship and the health of the relationship.
Absolutely. Diane, the last thing I want to kind of pick your brain on for this episode is how important would you say it is for women to kind of figure out their own sexual desires, figure out their own libido and all these things for themselves outside of just with their partner?
It's incredibly important. It's incredibly important. It's like I'll give a diagram. I'll show a diagram. So for anybody that's just listening to this, I encourage you to watch this because what I'm holding up is a diagram of the female anatomy. And what we see at the top is the clitoris, which is like, or the head of the clitoris, which is like the external part people can see, like that nub. But the clitoris actually comes down and it has this like these long legs. It kind of looks like a wishbone. So it goes all the way through our pelvis. And then we have these vestibular bulbs, which are these real spongy tissues on like in our vulva, and they engorge, they get filled with blood. And for so many people, these areas, for so many women, are so much more profound as far as the sensation by a landslide than anything that's happening inside the vagina. And so we are missing sometimes some of the most important excitatory tissue that exists for women. And our job as women is to help educate the partners in our life to help them understand what our bodies need. And if we don't even know what our bodies need, it's really difficult to tell a partner about this. So I think, self pleasure is a great way of doing that. I think it's one of the best ways of doing that. But, I realize there's people of like, religious backgrounds and that sort of thing that may not find that that's accessible to them. So even if it's not accessible for you from the standpoint of your beliefs, another great way you can do it is take the self out and just have exploratory sessions with your partner to say, hey, and it's not about orgasming, it's about taking these, structures that I just showed through different things, actually exploring to be like, oh, this part of my body has more sensation than before. So, I think it's lovely to do, by oneself, but there's definitely inclusivity for people that are like, hey, that doesn't work for their own belief system, of how to actually do that with a partner, to bring a partner in and still have great exploration and discovery. The important part is that we learn our body through one of these mechanisms.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned that it's our job almost to educate our partner and to inform them on what fits for us and what doesn't. Because I think sometimes in society, it's easy for people to be like, oh, well, you just don't have good chemistry with this person because the sex wasn't very good. And it's like, oh, he should know how to do this. He should know how to do that. And it's like, you got to teach your partner because everyone is so different. And that's not a bad thing that you have to have this conversation with them. And it's not a bad thing that you may have to explore the topic with them. It's actually the healthiest thing that you can do.
Exactly, exactly. And that is what we've seen in research to keep the relationship and the sex life really strong. And the cool thing is, right, what happens inside the bedroom is a great practice for what happens outside the bedroom. So as we learn around how to have these conversations, and I have a methodology for how we do that. So if people are like, well, how do I do that? Come to my website, start with a libido quiz, start by getting my book. And I have more depth of courses that I can help support you there. But the idea is like what's happening if we learn how to communicate around something that is a little more taboo, that can bring up feelings and emotions, that actually can then bleed into conversations around other things. And not only can it help sex, but it can help the overall way we are communicating with our partner, even beyond the sexual space.
Yeah. Like Diane was saying, if you feel like this topic is really hitting a string for you, first step, take the libido quiz. Absolutely. Learn more about maybe where you're at. Next step, get her book. 100%. Even if, like I was saying, you're really comfortable with your relationship with your partner, I think this is something that anyone could benefit from. And I'll make sure to have Diane's website and all of these things in the description so they're easily accessible. But Diane, thank you for joining us today. This is a topic, like I said, I've never really dove into on the podcast. So I'm honored that it was with you that we were able to open this up.
Thank you, Lexi. I'm honored to be here with you as well. And thanks for helping me share this really important message. I'm really on a mission to improve a million relationships. And it's through, partnering with people like you, I'm able to do that. So I really appreciate your time.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And I will make sure to have Diane's socials and everything in the description as well. So if this is a topic you're really passionate about as well, you can keep up with her and constantly be learning from what she posts. So thank you, Diane, and I will see you guys next week.